Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. I just got off the red eye from San Francisco on 3 hours of sleep. I'm going to rely on my notes a little more than I normally would. Thank you for bearing with me. I was here actually a couple days ago, and a couple days before that, and a couple days before that. I testified in front of the Senate Select Intelligence Committee on this topic on Wednesday of last week. So some of my remarks are drawn from my statement from the record there because I felt like there would be an interesting provocation for this group as well. So over the past decade, disinformation, misinformation, and social media hoaxes have evolved from a nuisance into a high-stakes information war. But our frameworks for dealing with them remain the same. We discuss counter-messaging, we discuss counter-narratives, and we treat this as a problem of truth and narrative rather than as a problem of mass dissemination of malign narratives as well as signatures that indicate adversarial involvement in the ecosystem. So we're still treating this as a problem of truth rather than as a problem of something that would be more akin to cybersecurity. So information warfare as a cybersecurity issue is an ongoing national security issue, and it must be addressed through a collaboration between governments responsible for the safety of their citizens and private industry responsible for the integrity of their platforms. So propaganda and malign narratives have existed for a very long time, but today's influence operations, because they co-opt popular social platforms, are materially different. It's propaganda spread by friends to friends, seeded into groups, pushed through pages, sent via ads, in some cases sent directly via things like Messenger to get activists to take the action out onto the streets. So to conduct an operation, adversaries leverage the entire media ecosystem to push the narrative and manufacture the appearance of popular consensus. The operation is planned on one platform, often starting in a message board. Then it's moved to something like Twitter, where there's hope that mainstream media will pick it up. It's pushed through Facebook into pages and groups. And the goal is to take advantage of things like trending algorithms for algorithmic amplification. Eventually, if the content stays up long enough, it'll be recommended via the recommendation engines as well. So we have a system where the entire ecosystem is co-opted, but instead of looking at this as a systemic problem, we're still addressing it in a very piecemeal way, where we're reliant on private platforms to kind of get their own ducks in a row on one individual platform without recognizing that this is a systemic issue. So we're here in part because the Internet Research Agency employed this playbook. They conducted an operation that leveraged our social networks to spread disinformation and propaganda directly to American citizens. Now, that operation began in 2013, and it continued through the 2016 election cycle, and then it actually increased in 2017. So the goal was not solely to manipulate the election, but there are some indications that because the 2016 campaign was so easy, things began to even increase in 2017. So the IRA content on Facebook and Instagram alone had hundreds of millions of engagements. Estimates from Facebook indicate that 146 million users across 2 platforms were affected. The campaign did appear on every single major platform in the social network ecosystem: Reddit, Tumblr, Medium, YouTube, Google+, Twitter's Vine video app, even meme boards on Pinterest. Popular games such as Pokemon Go were incorporated into the operation. And then outside of social platforms, a number of websites were created that hosted original written content, and they looked like the kind of citizen journalism work that's become kind of increasingly prevalent today. So they did a very good job making their content look like what the audience expected it to look like. They co-opted White House petitions, they created Twitter accounts that masqueraded as local news, and topics ran the gamut from kind of high emotional resonance social issues to topics like war, the environment, corporate greed, GMOs, energy policy, and immigration. So the Internet Research Agency's campaign focused on a variety of socially divisive issues, but the primary one was racial tension. And that's because there are very real race issues that are deeply problematic in American society, and so they were able to take that and turn that into both politicized narratives and culture-based narratives. And so race was by far the #1 topic that they pushed out across all social platforms. Hundreds of thousands of Americans liked Facebook pages with names like Blacktivist, Heart of Texas, and Stop All Invaders. And the percentage of explicitly political content that mentioned the candidates by name was small. It was approximately 10% of the content that we know about so far. But in pages targeting, it was actually unified in its opposition to one candidate, to Secretary Clinton. So there were pages that targeted both the right and the left. The pages that targeted the left did include a number of anti-candidate Trump posts, but they were also uniformly anti-candidate Clinton. And so there were a lot of suppression narratives, particularly targeting the black community, particularly saying things like a vote for Jill Stein is not a wasted vote, the primary was stolen from candidate Sanders, et cetera. And so there were a lot of narratives around suppression on that side. And then on the right, it was uniformly pro-candidate Trump. There was actually a substantial amount of anti-Senator Rubio and anti-Senator Cruz content kind of within that 10%. So only the social networks that hosted the campaign are in a position to gauge its full impact on changing voter attitudes, which is one of the main problems today. We know that it had phenomenal amounts of engagements in the hundreds of millions. We know that there were tons of comments left on organic posts. We know that there were comments left on the Instagram posts, but nobody has that data. Nobody really knows what happened. So in order to have a full picture of where we are today, we're really reliant on social platforms. So although the hearing that I was part of was convened because of the IRA interference in 2016, Russia wasn't the first to target American citizens with propaganda. We actually saw ISIS do a remarkable job building a virtual caliphate, similarly across every social platform, similarly beginning in 2013, but with remarkably high visibility. Everything was branded with a black flag as they built their brand across the social ecosystem. And because of a lack of coordination, both within the government, between the government and private sector, and then within private sector, nobody was in charge. There was no framework for dealing with this. And so basically what happened is anybody who was watching saw that this was a phenomenally vulnerable ecosystem ripe for manipulation. So I think one of the things that we're going to have an opportunity to talk about today is some of the policy proposals associated with this. Senator Warner recently put out 20, and because I've only got 5 minutes or 3 minutes left, I'm not going to have time to go through them all. But I would encourage you to read his paper on this to get a sense of how government is thinking about this. Some of it is related to things like tracking the malign narratives themselves with a duty to clearly and conspicuously label bots, duty to determine origin of posts, duty to identify inauthentic accounts. These are things that are very difficult to do from a technical perspective, but these are the ideas that we're starting to see floated. And then require an interagency task force for countering asymmetric threats to democratic institutions. So in addition to the ongoing exploitation of social divisions, the targeting of elections, and disinformation about geopolitical events, we're beginning to see campaigns targeting industry. We're beginning to see campaigns thriving in regards to things like anti-GMO narratives, energy policy interference, entertainment interference. We're seeing things that were undertaken by state actors begin to be undertaken by domestic ideologues, which is where that line between free speech and how we deal with the platform, how we deal with manipulation of our platforms while still respecting free speech is a deep challenge. So the evolution of social media propaganda and influence techniques will bring serious threats. We should anticipate an increase in the misuse of less popular and less resourced social platforms and an increase in the use of peer-to-peer messaging services. We do believe that future campaigns will be compounded by the employment of witting or unwitting US individuals. We're going to see a lot more narrative laundering. We're going to see a lot more incorporation of audio and video manipulation. We're going to see operations that make it difficult for citizens to trust their own eyes. So this will be one of the defining threats of our generation, and looking forward to discussing it with everyone in this room today. Influence operations exploit divisions in our society using vulnerabilities in our information ecosystem. They take advantage of America's commitment to freedom of speech and the free flow of ideas. And the social media platforms cannot and should not be the sole defenders of democracy and public discourse. So looking forward very much to the afternoon sessions and to speaking with you all individually about the work that we're doing at New Knowledge and at Mozilla.